Awesome. And we're recording. So today on Simple Science, I'm joined by Dr. John Rusin. He's an internationally recognized performance specialist, physical therapist, and strength coach who has dedicated his career to helping people train smarter, move better, and perform at their highest level without any pain. He's also the founder of the Pain Free Performance Training System, which has certified thousands of coaches and clinicians around the world. And he's worked with everyone from elite athletes to everyday high performers. Dr. Rusin's upcoming book, Pain Free Performance Move Better, Train Smarter, and Build an Unbreakable Body, will be a game changing resource for anyone who wants to push their limits without breaking down. In our conversation, we'll be talking about the science and philosophy behind his training system, exploring the 6 foundational movement patterns, and talk about how to build strength, resilience, and longevity in training and in life. So, Dr. Rusin, thanks so much for joining us today.
Mike, it's my pleasure. Thanks for being here.
So, I'm really interested to know, how did you get into this field? What was it like for you, maybe as a kid, teenager, young adult? What gave you that spark to say, I really like the human body and I want to build this thing up nice and strong?
I started as an athlete myself, and I lived in a house of Dr. and Dr. Rusin. That was my mom, and that was my dad. Dad was an athletic director. Mom was the dean at Health and Human Services at a college that I ended up getting a doctorate from. And I feel like those influences are what I do today. I bridge academics with athletics and try to give people the best in terms of their training and their health and their wellness by being physically active and taking responsibility for their own physical health. So, large scale, I think that it was simply born to happen.
Was it more of an academic push for you when you were a kid, that like if you weren't getting A's and B's in your classes, your mom and dad would be like, hey, you're better than this? Was there any of that?
Oh, one step further. If I wasn't getting A's in all of my classes, I wasn't playing basketball or football or baseball. I wasn't doing anything. So I remember being probably like 10 or 11 years old and getting like, it wasn't an ABC system back then, but essentially like a B in one of my classes. And my parents just sitting me down at dinner that night and being like, you only have 2 jobs in this world right now as our only child. We want you to excel academically so then you can excel athletically. And you're capable of doing both of those things. And I was like, oh shit, like I definitely want to play sports. So like I need to get my stuff in line. And I think that took me through all the way through high school and then in undergraduate and graduate school. And that was the big push was, hey, these two things go together. And those were my two big loves and focuses. Like I loved being smart and capable in the classroom. And I definitely loved excelling on the field and on the court. And I found confidence in those things and I found comfort in those things.
Was there a sense of, I guess, when you were a kid and you heard that? Because I had a very similar story. I had to call my basketball coach when I was 9 because I missed out on an extra credit assignment in math. And like, it was like, if you did extra credit, you could have 120 points in the class. And I had like a 105 and I could have gotten a 110. And my mom's like, you're going to call your basketball coach and tell him you're not coming to the game this weekend. And I was like, what? She's like, oh, I'm serious, young man. And it was weird because it was like I got like a sense of agency, of like responsibility, of like, if I want to play this sport and be there for my teammates even though I'm like a kid, then I need to do something in the classroom. Like, what did that give you, that sort of agency? Because now, I mean, even looking at like what you do with your businesses, I think that takes a certain amount of, as I said, I keep coming back to that term agency, and even just, responsibility in doing what you do.
Yeah. Man, I think it was an interesting one, and it was ingrained in me because my dad was my coach, no matter what the sport was. He was Dr. Rusin, 36 years at the Williamsville Central School District as the athletic director. He had his hands on every great athlete that had ever come through that district, 3 different high schools. And I remember him like probably like 8 or 9 years old, no matter what the sport we were playing, like his big like go-to line was like, that's how a Division I athlete plays. And that's what I was hearing from like age 9 on. It's like that was the ultimate level of success. And why was it a Division I athlete versus a professional athlete? Because he wanted myself and all of my teammates that I came up with, no matter what the sport it was, to take their skills in their sport to an academic institution where they could go and prepare for the rest of their life. So I don't necessarily think it was always a focus on excelling to the highest levels of professional sport. It was being able to celebrate the mesh between academics and athletics that he essentially did in his life, because he went on that same exact path, going through being a Division I athlete and then going and getting a master's degree, then a PhD. And that was very intriguing for me because I was looking at my dad like, this guy's the man. He has an immense amount of respect from everybody. And I simply want to follow in those footsteps, because when people respect you and also you have great results and you have an energy that serves others, that was palpable at a young age. And I was like, heck yeah, I'm on this path.
Was he like the cool dad among like all of your friends and all the dads? Like was he the one with like the like when you went into the room you sensed his energy?
You definitely sense his energy, but he was definitely not the cool dad. He was the dad that didn't let me have sleepovers because we needed to get our sleep the nights before games. He was the dad picking me up from school and dropping me off at school to make sure that I got there on point. And he was the one that was there practicing with me every single day. We had good times. We traveled the world with a lot of his academic endeavors and the way he was presenting and stuff and like that. And we had so many great experiences, but a lot was centered again on, hey, I want to make sure that you are excelling in that classroom, which I did. And then once you do that, we are going to open up your eyes to what we can do with what ended up being my sport, which was baseball, and literally traveling the country and doing things that other kids today seem like it's normal. But back then, it was an extraordinary experience to be able to go to all these colleges and showcases and have scholarship offers and essentially like have all of that hard work in both the classroom and on the field just essentially pay off with a scholarship and being like, heck yeah, this is this is super cool. It's like 8 years old, being called this is how a Division I athlete plays. Like, heck yeah, that's what I am right now. So I'm in that scholarship. So I think that he was the cool dad, but he was the dad that everybody wanted to be their dad because he was getting results and he was pushing the limits and he was setting the standard of doing things above and beyond what anyone else was doing.
But it sounded like he did that from a place of just like love and caring. That like he wanted everyone to be academically strong, physically and healthily strong, like probably eating healthy, getting your sleep, and then performing on the field. So it was a well-rounded approach. It wasn't just like one single thing. Put all your eggs in this basket and I'm gonna yell at you if you strike out. Like he wanted everything for all of you.
Well, I think when you grow up the way that he did, he grew up dirt poor. He didn't have anything. And he somehow clawed his way into being like a three-star high school sport guy. The point guard on the basketball team, all state. The quarterback on the football team, all state. The shortstop on the baseball team, all state. Getting a Division I scholarship out of nowhere in our hometown of Buffalo, New York, and seeing that, holy shit, this is what it takes. This is what it takes. And even though I grew up a little bit differently than he did, we were a strong middle class family in Buffalo, New York. I think those same principles and those same tenets of how to be successful across many different attributes of your life, it remained the same and it just got communicated on repeat. I think the repetition of what I was hearing really locked it in for me. And 30 plus years later, as I sit here talking to you today, I still have those thoughts in my mind because it was ingrained in me.
Hey, you guys won last night, right? The Bills?
We did,
Yeah.
yeah, 3-0 to start the season. Let's go.
Yeah, nice job. I'm hoping the Eagles can wrap it up this Sunday against the Rams. We'll see what happens. But no, I mean that's awesome. I can feel it in your energy because I don't really like know you too well. It's the first time we're chatting. And I'm like, you are like a determined person, and it's wonderful to hear it from that perspective too. Of like in the first 30 seconds, you're like, yeah, I come from Dr. Rusin, and I'm like, man, like you have like a lot of love and respect to your parents. And to hear that about your dad, I don't know about your mom, but hearing about your dad clawing his way up and being all state in all these different sports and earning his doctorate and getting married and having a son, and you go on to be very successful. It reminds me of that quote, which you've undoubtedly heard of: how you do anything is how you do everything. And I try and do that every day too. It's like when I like wipe down like the countertop or like I clean the dishes after the meal, like I want to do it perfectly. My girlfriend makes fun of me, but I'm like, no, like if I'm going to show up for you, I'm going to show up for this little job here. I'm going to show up for my students. I'm going to show up for my family. This is how I want to do these things. It's exacting, but it doesn't stop there. And I think that has huge dividends. And to hear that he imparted that to you and all your friends and your teammates at 8 years old, and then 20, 30 years later, it's like you're still like a dynamo. I'm like, holy cow, like this is parenting 101.
I look back on my high school career. So between my sophomore, junior, and senior year, those are kind of the kids that I grew up playing with, all the different sports, the kids that I went to high school with, the kids that were teammates of mine. We had 17 Division I signees in those three classes. And it's a heavy influence from my father because he was the one coaching and putting in the extra time with these kids and making sure that also their academics were on point so they could go out and get those scholarships and be able to be, a student athlete. As much as that's not a thing anymore, back then it was the ultimate compliment to be the student athlete. But I grew up in a very interesting spot in Buffalo, New York, because we had, future NFL Hall of Famers growing up right in my class. The Gronkowski brothers went to high school with me. I've been playing with them since I was 6 years old. And we had, even more great athletes that were even better than them growing up. And I think that it was all everybody coming up the same way, but also being pushed in the right way and just setting a standard of, hey, now we're adults, we're 40 now. And how are you doing things today? It's most likely exactly those same lessons that we learned 30 years ago.
So you grew up with Gronk like around that same time?
Yeah, all the Gronkowskis. So Rob, obviously the most
Yeah, I
famous,
didn't
is
know he
the
had any
NFL
siblings.
Hall
I
of
mean, everybody
Famer.
knows like the Gronk smash, but
Yeah, he was 1 year behind me, but because he was so big and really good at everything that he did, he always played on my baseball, basketball, and football teams, which was really cool. But he also had a younger brother and then older brothers as well. There are four of them. So the older brother was 1 year older than me, and then there was a one that was even older that was 3 years older than me. And all of them went Division I, and many of them, actually, all four of them, ended up being professional athletes at one point in time. And they were just a dime in a dozen because we had even more people having success at huge levels, right out of high school and into college in our little community, which was definitely a hotbed throughout that decade.
so do you think that I mean, like, it really sounds like kind of rounding that thing out. Like, your dad was like one of like the big people in the community around that, and that just became the standard of, as you said, being a student athlete and really just taking this as far as possible. So, do you think that like it's so like super super important to surround yourself with the right people from day one?
It is, but you also have to lead from the front.
Okay.
You can't just go, hey, I'm going to go and seek out all these people because when you're 7 and 8 years old, you're just kids. You're just kids, and everyone's about the same, and nobody has any talents. Some kids have personality, but we're all moldable. So I think that when you start to come up and you start to get around the right people, you can find your tribe very quickly. But it's up to you to maintain your tribe and be able to elevate your tribe. And the academics were definitely not the same type of mentality, at least for me. I always excelled academically, but I know a number of my teammates were like always, struggling a little bit or average, but not really going in and like taking the AP classes and going in and graduating early, stuff like that. But I think the one thing that pulled everyone back together was the athletics. But I don't know what it was about the academics specifically for me that really like locked me in, but that was something that I was always like just proud of being able to do. Up until the point where when it was time to pick what school I wanted to play baseball at, I had around 30 scholarship offers, all Division I schools, and sifting through the different schools, I ended up taking a scholarship offer at St. Bonaventure University, which is in Western New York. It's right on the Erie, PA border. And I had way better, sexier schools offers. I had offers from Ivy League schools. I had offers down south and in the Midwest. And why pick St. Bonaventure University? It was because of the academics, not at that school, but the package that they delivered. I don't know if I've ever talked about this, but this is what I did as a junior in high school when I actually accepted that offer. My dad got with the guidance counselors and my professors at my high school, and he said, John's grades are really good. I see this transcript, I see this ACT score, like he's rocking and rolling academically. And we want to leverage that and we want to guarantee him a spot in medical school out of high school. And this was, it's a little bit more mainstream now, but back then it was like there was only three places that would do that. And there was this one place called Lake Erie College of Osteopathic Medicine. Bringing it back to the Bills, if anyone watches Hard Knocks and you see that LECOM thing on Josh Allen's chest on the practice jerseys, it's that school. So that school, I went through about 4 interviews over a 2 month period. Again, I'm a junior in high school at this point in time. And LECOM goes, you know what? Very impressive. All American baseball player, great ACT scores, perfect report cards. We're going to put you into this 4+4 program, meaning that all you got to do is graduate with your 4-year degree in, pre-med biology, whatever the heck it was at the time. And we guarantee you the seat and you can come in, no stress. You don't even have to apply to any schools. You're in. And at that point in time, I'm like, holy shit, like I guaranteed being doctor, and the third doctor in my family. And I'm 17 years old and I'm sitting in junior year of high school. And wow, this is super awesome. And the long story short is that I chose to go to St. Bonaventure University because they guaranteed a med school entrance. And it wasn't really about the baseball. And that was a really interesting decision. Like looking back on it, probably maybe not the right decision for me, but at that point, I was like, man, I just achieved everything and I'm 17 years old. Like, where do I go from here?
Oh my God. There's so much to like unpack from that. And it's funny you said you're like, "Oh, it's the first time we were talking about this." I'm like, "Please keep going." Yeah, we have a LECom here in Jacksonville, Florida.
Okay.
So like I've heard of it, and like
Oh,
some
wow.
of our students will go there, and I'm like the doctor who checked me out like a few months ago, like I went to like a routine appointment from LECom, and I was like, "Oh, it's funny we're bringing that up."
Yeah.
So what like it's funny because I did know a couple of kids, sort of to that extent. One of my good friends got an offer from Stanford his junior year for soccer. And he also happened to be like an AP student, 4.0. He was in like the Key Club and, the Spanish
Yeah.
Honor Society. He goes, "Hey, Mike, I think I'm going to go to Stanford for soccer, but I'm not going to be a pro, but I'm going to get a degree from Stanford." I said, "Dude, never stop. Keep going." And he graduated from Stanford. And I was like, man, like this is it right here. So what was at that time like were you just like zoned in and focused? Like you didn't see anything else or were you also like tons of friends and you had a really good balance or what were you like at 17?
At 17, I was definitely very focused on sports and on school. And I think that my teammates were ultimately the people that I spent the most amount of time with, but pretty social. Definitely didn't get into too much trouble, but always was very focused on what I was doing, almost to a fault. So, when you get in and you're doing your thing, like you kind of don't know any other way. And I think that when I started going on the trips for like, you get 5 official visits to like go to the campus and they bring your parents and all this stuff. You spend 3 days there and like everyone's drinking beers and stuff I never drank in my life. Everyone's partying, doing all this stuff. I was like, holy shit! Like there is a lot out there that I've never really experienced. But I was fine with that at that point in time because I mean, results speak. When you're achieving your life's goals that early on, you feel like you want to stay on that path. But I think when you do that early, when you have like the Division I scholarship, and then you have the entrance into medical school, where do you go from there? So very quickly it turned into like, okay, like I want to be able to prep for the MLB draft. I want to be able to be draftable out of high school and I want to be able to make that decision if I can do so. So into my senior year and really after I signed, it turned into, okay, let's get draft ready. And at that point in time, I gave up basketball. I gave up all my other sports. It was strictly strength and conditioning and then baseball off-season prep work and then getting into my season, I wanted to be ready to roll because in Buffalo, New York, you don't get a whole lot of like scouts just like, going around the fields and seeing who's out there for high school baseball. So you have to be in the know. You definitely have to have some sort of accolade and there has to be some heat behind you. And I did definitely have that. And I was working well. I was in the best shape of my life at that point in time. At senior year of high school, I'm still 6 feet, but I was 6 feet back then, about 192 pounds, able to run and do everything that I needed to do. I was like, man, I am ready to roll. And about 3 games into my senior season, it was about 37 degrees on a bad field in Buffalo, New York. Our bus was late coming to the field, but there was like 3 scouts there. There's 3 scouts there finally. I played center field, And for anyone who doesn't know baseball, you don't really get a whole lot of action if you play in the outfield. So maybe you'll catch one or two balls, you'll get a couple ground balls, but very rarely do you have a play where you're going to show off your arm and throw as hard as you possibly can to try to get a run around. So it's all about the pregame. So the bus is late. Don't really warm up very well, but you know what? My ego was driving the bus at that point in time, and I get out there, and in the pregame, I end up throwing out my arm, tearing my UCL on my throwing arm, and that being a huge humbling point up until that point in my entire life, because I went from everything to all of this stuff happening in front of me to I am now unable to play, unable to throw, in an excruciating amount of pain, and going into orthopedic surgeons and doctors' visits instead of essentially getting ready to, again, achieve the next goal, which was go and try to get drafted. So that was a huge slice of humble pie, but I think that was most likely the origin of why I got into what I'm doing today. I think every physical therapist out there, or every surgeon, or every athletic trainer will say something along the lines of, like, yeah, I was an athlete, I got hurt, and I don't want my athletes to get hurt the same way. That's essentially my story, but it was learned the hard way because I was, after that point, mismanaged in physical therapy, mismanaged from the doctors that I was seeing, mismanaged from the surgeons. And I feel like I had a whole lot of potential that was still pent up, but I never necessarily got the chance to go through and actually show what I could do because it was always a hindrance from some of these more serious injuries.
Did you get the Tommy John surgery then, the UCL?
I did not. I did not. So I was recommended not to do anything, to rest, which is always the best. It's always the best thing coming from the orthopedic surgeon. I think you should just rest.
Yeah, especially with a ligament that has no blood flow going to it. It's like physiology
But
101.
you don't know. Even my parents, extraordinarily smart people, and you look at the God complex from the doctor who is in front of you, giving you a recommendation, and you at that point in time, your lowest of the low in your life, you're going to do what that doctor says. And that's not just orthopedic injuries, that's systemic health issues, it's issues across the board. We need to remember that we need to be our own best advocates sometimes. We need to ask harder questions. We need to get second and third opinions. And we need to take things a little bit more seriously than, hey, this is the one person I went to. Whatever he says, I'm going to do. We got to do better than that, especially when it's advocating for our own health and trying to, essentially rebuild your body and rebuild that.
That's wild. And like this, it's what's funny is that this wasn't even like that long ago. What are you going back like only like 20 years or something? Like
Correct.
that's not a long time ago. Like I remember that. And um so I guess from that point, did you become your own advocate, your own scientist, your own doctor? What did that look like for you?
No, I didn't. No, I was 18. I didn't know shit. I still took my scholarship. I went and played, and I didn't play as successfully as I wanted to. I never did any rehab. I never went to physical therapy seriously. I never did anything to strengthen, other than just like find myself back in the weight room with one of my mentors over at University of Buffalo, just trying to rebuild as best as we possibly could. And that was smart functional training back in the day when functional training wasn't super popular, and it was training that allowed it load capacity and allowed us to essentially start to callus the system again, get big, get strong, be able to get into your positions that you need to, and see how it goes from there. And how it went from there was okay for the next like year or two. I was able to throw again, never able to really have the fatigue factor that I needed in terms of being able to throw every day in the season, but I could still throw fast. I could still let off a rocket every now and then, but it was something that it was a constant ache and pain for me. So it caused me, just issues emotionally, psychologically. It's really hard to play without confidence when you're playing at these types of levels. And I found that as a big hindrance, even though it didn't hurt when I swung, or it didn't hurt when I went to field or run or do any of this stuff. It was always in the back of my mind. So I had that PTSD from this injury, even though seemingly it was gone and it wasn't really around much anymore. But to make things even weirder, I end up transferring to the University of Rhode Island after a summer in the Florida Collegiate Baseball League. So I played really well the summer after my freshman year. And I got, it's free transfer policy back then. So in baseball, nobody gave a shit about us. So you could like transfer around, you could do whatever the heck you want, kind of like today in college sports. So I ended up getting a scholarship offer from University of Rhode Island, top 25 school. And I'm like, you know what? I don't think that med school stuff is for me anymore. I don't think it's for me anymore. And I'm going to go and chase baseball instead. That was a 19-year-old making, bad decisions, if I'm being completely honest. So I get to University of Rhode Island, doing really well. I'm in a good spot. We're in the weight room. We're training. I'm slotted nice. I'm able to be at the top of the lineup. I'm able to play my position. And I find myself 13 games into, again, the season, and I dive for a ball in center field. It's the last ball I've ever played. And I get my non-throwing arm caught under me. And my non-throwing arm tears the UCL.
That's two
And
for
that's
two.
the last baseball game I ever played. And at that point in time, that was a huge mind fuck because you're like, man, I've spent the last couple of years blaming the surgeon, blaming this physical therapist. Maybe it's a structural issue. Maybe it's me. How the hell can you tear both UCLs, bilateral UCL tears? Look that shit up. It is very rare. And that's what I was dealing with. And that sent me, that's essentially sent me home. So I ended up finishing up the year at University of Rhode Island, finishing up my academics, holding it together there, not able to play anymore, but then going back to University of Buffalo, essentially jumping into a red shirt and not being able to play that season. You can't transfer 2 or 3 years in a row. You can only do the two. And I ended up just going back in and trying to rebuild. But I found myself back in the weight room of my early on mentor, Ed Fitzsimmons, over at University of Buffalo. And at this point in time, it was like, we need to start doing things a little bit differently. I can't believe that you have this other arm injury at your elbow on your left and your right from a couple of years ago. It's time to actually start getting in and trying to bulletproof, trying to mitigate risk of injury futuristically. Let's try to deep dive in, not just get you ready for the season, but let's get you ready for life because, I mean, you got to be able to function for the rest of your life and hopefully get back into baseball. And that turned into a very interesting and really an influential year for me because I was in the weight room like 4 or 5 hours a day because I loved being there. I wanted to rehab. I wanted to do all this stuff. Found myself back in a comfortable area. I did well academically again, and I was able to get pulled in as an intern doing some stuff with Olympic sports at that point in time. University of Buffalo, it's not Stanford, but it's Division One. It's a Research One university, and it's the flagship of the SUNY Buffalo system, State University of New York system. And I found myself going in and being able to be involved with PhD research labs. I found myself a mentor in the research lab who was doing baseball throwing mechanics. As his PhD dissertation, I spent a year and a half, 2 years in the lab with him, being able to be his subject and being able to basically be whatever he needed me to be at that point in time. And I took all these things that I love, which was the weight room and being in this research lab and then obviously going back into class. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I ended up that year and I ended that semester and I got pulled in like to a meeting with people that I'd never met before, who was essentially supposed to be like the dean and like people that were in charge of what I did academically. And they're like, John, nice to meet you. We just want to let you know you can graduate if you want. And I'm like, I've only been in school 3 years. I don't know what you're talking about. They're like, no, you have enough credits to graduate today. I was like, oh, but I have baseball. I redshirted this year, so I have 2 years eligibility left in baseball. And they're like, well, if you don't want to play baseball, you can go on and you can graduate and go on to your next endeavor. So I was like, holy shit. At that point in time, I was back at home. I live 5 minutes away from the University of Buffalo campus. So I was back at the house with my mom and my dad, almost like, it was like stepbrothers again. And, I brought it up and I was like, hey, they said I could graduate. And my parents were like, that's interesting, but what about baseball? And I was like, no, I think I'm going to just go back and play baseball. 2 weeks later, I was done. And 3 weeks later, I was back as an intern and an assistant in that weight room with my first position. which was really cool. So I ended up going in and coaching Olympic sports for a year at University of Buffalo. And that was amazing because I got to spend 100% of my time over there. Didn't have to go to class in between. I was just simply working with the Olympic sports, working with the women's basketball team, working with the rowing team and crew. And it was super awesome. And it was everything that I ever wanted because I learned along that way that I didn't necessarily love baseball the same way that I loved training for baseball. The thing that I loved about it was the camaraderie, the teammates, the energy, the ability to come together and do something greater than just yourself. But I found that energy in the weight room. And I actually gravitated more towards that over those years of being hurt than I did just being out on the field throwing or hitting. And I think that that natural transition point between athlete and coach was made in that year.
And were you able to give just as much of your heart and your soul, if not more of it, to the athletes who you were coaching? And further on that, were you able to kind of put your own woes aside of like the double UCL injury?
Not at first. If I'm being completely honest, I was not a good coach at first. And the reason I wasn't a good coach wasn't because I didn't have great experience. I did at that point. It wasn't because I didn't have great mentors. I absolutely did. It wasn't because I didn't have academic accolades. I did. It was because I was too close to my playing career to have to essentially not set aside my ego. I was still looking at the athletes that I was working with in training as people that I was competing with. And I think that it does take a number of years to be able to pull yourself out from, hey, the me mentality of being an athlete, being able to take care of me so I can then take care of the team, versus a we mentality right off the bat as coaching. We are working with coach client or coach and athlete relationships that is all about service. It's about servicing that athlete or that client with everything that you have and being selfless in the process. Part of being a great coach is being able to take your needs, set them aside, and be able to facilitate the huge wins for your clients no matter what it takes. And that is a level of maturity that I think that takes years, if not decades, to be able to really fine tune and hone to the point where you can essentially step back and give your all to somebody else and feel great about it in the process.
So do you think, and I can't agree with you more on like the whole coaching aspect, and a lot of people kind of get into this for the wrong reasons, especially people nowadays trying to like be like, oh, DM me for coaching. And it's like, oh my God, if there's like one thing that gets me, it's like that. But no, it's funny because you said like it took you a while. And when I was doing my master's at UCF, a lot of former Division I athletes were going to do their masters, which was like amazing. And they all had like a lot of them had a huge loss of identity because I was trying to understand from their perspective what must it be like to be the talk of the town in maybe not one or two sports but three sports your entire life. Oh, and then you go on to play like a Division I sport with like your name on a backpack and team sneakers and food getting handed to you and a free scholarship, and then boom, you're 22 years old, you're done. What's that like? And I always was really happy. I never knew what that was because I started running marathons and ultra marathons later, and I'm not that good at it, but I just like I have fun. So
Yeah.
what was that loss of identity like? And it seems like now, like as you being a coach and as you doing all of your programs and your books, I mean, you just dive in head first. It's like nothing ever stopped you. You just like you gain even more momentum.
The identity crisis. That's essentially what it was for about a year or 2 years. I was happy as a clam because I was there training with people and I thought it was the best thing in the world. I was making like no money. Good thing I lived with my parents because I could not support myself whatsoever at that point. Thank God I had a bed, a room, and food coming for dinner. And at that point, like I found myself in interesting spots. Like I was coaching, but then I was also playing on the women's basketball scout team because I thought I was better than them because I saw their athleticism and I wanted to show them. And it was me and six other guys, and we were trying to beat the women on their scout team. And that's not appropriate for a strength and conditioning coach to be doing, even though it was super fun at the time. I made a lot of great friends in that process, but I found myself in weird spots like that where it's like, hey, I still want to compete and be an athlete. I still want to be the man, but I also really do care about these athletes. And that left me into like this lull of like, hey, what is next? Because I'm fine doing this and I know that I'll figure it out. My dad always said it takes 3 to 5 years to transition between athlete and coach, and you'll make it there. He was giving me some guidance on it. But after about a year, it was kind of like, okay, like, is this going to be your be all end all of everything? Is this what you're going to do for the rest of your life? And there was a little pressure from my parents to be able to like continue my education on, to be able to do something because I've always excelled there. Athletics was gone for me, but academics was definitely still there, and it was a strong suit always. And they were always pressuring, like going back to school. They always believed in education. They did the trifecta, the undergrad, master's, and the doctorate. So I think the expectation was I would eventually get there. And I remember just one day, my mom just bringing it up in conversation, being like, "Hey, we have a new program over at Damon College. Like, we have a new program, and I think like it's something that you'd be interested in." And I'm like, "Well, what is it?" They're like, "Doctorate of physical therapy." And I'm like, the only thing I heard was physical therapy. And the only thing I thought of was, I remember physical therapy. It was that guy when I was 18 years old that gave me bad advice. And that's the reason that I didn't play baseball at a professional level. And then the spiral comes. So I hear physical therapy, and right off the bat, I have a negative connotation to it because I don't think it served me properly, even though I had never actually been through a full bout of physical therapy with a great clinician that was there to solve problems. So I didn't have a complete view of what the profession actually was. So I wanted to be respectful. And I went into campus that day, and there's Main Street in Buffalo, New York. Main Street in Buffalo, New York has Damon College on one side, and then you drive 2 miles and it has University of Buffalo South Campus on the other side. It's about 10 minutes away from my house. And I pull up to Main Street, Buffalo, New York, right in front of Damon College. And I look up while I'm in the car driving. On the right hand side of the road, there's a billboard. And there's a billboard of a woman with a Dodgers hat on. And she's clearly in the dugout at the Los Angeles Dodgers. And the caption is "First female physical therapist in Major League Baseball history. Congratulations." And I'm like, holy shit. That's where I want to be. I want to be in that dugout. And then like my love for baseball comes back, my love for strength and conditioning, all this stuff comes back. And I'm like, oh, that's what physical therapy could possibly be. Okay, mom, you might be right on this. So a couple weeks later, going back and forth through, different scholarship options, and then also just making sure my transcript looked right to be able to get into school. Boom, I'm registered for a doctorate of physical therapy, having never gone to physical therapy or even knowing what the heck it is a day in my life, solely based on the woman, Sue Falzoni, having been on that billboard with the Dodgers cap on and the right place at the right time and the right mental headspace to make a decent decision with my life. And that was my next 3.5 years over in graduate school. I continued to do personal training on the side. I continued to be able to work over at the University of Buffalo weight room with the Division I athletes. But I spent a vast majority of my time just deep dove into academics because at that level, you got to spend a lot of time, energy, and resources mentally, physically, and emotionally into simply getting through because it's no joke. And in that 3.5 year period, that was another like weird transition point for me because I definitely felt like an outlier, knowing very well that my goal was never to be a traditional physical therapist, never be a systems-based medical model physical therapist. I simply wanted to use this as a launching pad to probably just get back into sports and get back into strength and conditioning, which was not music to any of my professors' ears.
It's incredible to like hear that because so before this like this question, how old were you when you ended up going to PT school? Because you graduated early and then you like spent some time coaching and then you started PT
I
school.
was 22, 23.
That's perfect. Yeah, like around that time, it was funny because when I was right out of college, I went to do my master's, and my professors made it abundantly clear you will not do a PhD with us. And I was like, okay, well, I'll leave and I'll do something else. But I was training a lot of like pretty like high like level folks down in Central Florida and like some like those Disney communities and some of the communities like where
Yeah.
Shaq used to live. So I was making quite a bit of money at like 22, 23. And like the boss who was kind of like looking over me because I was training out of his gym was like, hey, like every one of these people who are my neighbors in this community are millionaires because like the minimum house was like $6 or $7 million. And he goes, if you have a business card, I'll pass it out. And you at 22, 23 can train every one of these people. And at like 22, 23, I was like, oh, money's cool. But like, I was like running a ton of races and I was having fun with my older brother and a couple of friends and whatever, a couple of girls here and there. And then I was like, something inside of me was like, I need to do something more. And my parents were always like very lovingly digging into my side. And they're like, hey man, like you 4-0'd all of those science classes. I was obsessively writing articles on like sports supplements and exercise physiology. Like nobody read my articles, but I was obsessively writing them on like different types of like, protein powders and like how to look at like this, and like the protein digestibility correct amino acid score. Like I was a kind of a nerd, but they're like, I think you should do this thing. And like I just started like obsessively like emailing different researchers around the country, and I was like, I want to research cardiovascular disease. And I, like after the fifth or sixth one, I got like 2 or 3 offers and interviews, and I said no thanks to that guy, and I just went up and did my PhD.
I love
and,
it.
and there's like not a lot of regret because now I'm going back and I'm training a lot of those folks, but like I couldn't get it out of my head that I wanted to do science. And it's funny because like you had like incredible potential because you worked so hard, and it's like you didn't even like really press the pause button because you were working really hard, but then you kind of like took a water break, and then you're like, all right, now let me zoom this thing in and let me get into like the major leagues as a physical therapist, and I can help everyone that I possibly can. That's amazing.
It didn't work out that way, though, man. It did not work out that way. As amazing as that would have been, that was not my journey. My journey in graduate school started with, hey, I'm going to continue to coach full time. And I'm smart. I'll get by. And going into my first gross anatomy lab test and scoring a 41%.
Is that out of 100?
That's out of 100. Yeah, 41. A 41. And we only had 2 tests. You had a midterm and a final. And I scored 41% on half of my grade for that test, or for that semester. And very quickly, things got real because the anatomy professor, another one of my longtime mentors, he was a baseball guy. His kids were baseball guys. So he knew me, he knew my dad. And all of a sudden, I am in his office and he's like, hey, John, you really fucked this one up. Like, you're not going to be able to pass. You're gonna fail out of school. Holy shit. Like, then things got real. Things got real for me because you can't just get by on your natural abilities. You have to work at things. It doesn't matter how smart you are. If you don't know origin, action, insertion, innervation of all structures in the human body, you're not going to get past these tests. So I made the decision to back off of coaching a bit, put my ass back into the library with the time that I was coaching instead. And that made a huge difference. I continued to get better and better as the semesters went on. And I found myself in a really interesting spot. The second summer, it was like an internship that you have to do. You have to go to all these different places. I spent, one summer I spent in an elementary and a middle school working with kids with CP. Being able to bring strength training to them was a super rewarding experience. Next summer, I find myself in the hospital. The hospital that's like 5 minutes away from my house. And I wanted to only think about orthopedics, 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 because that was like my ticket. I wanted to be able to match my coaching with the orthopedic knowledge base. I didn't know orthopedics, man. I'm going to spend this entire summer walking people around for the first time after they have new joints thrown into their bodies. I didn't know that's what I was going to be doing. So, yeah, I'm in there and people are having total hips, total knees, sometimes bilateral total knees, sometimes bilateral total hips. And all of a sudden, it's my job to be able to stand their asses up and be able to have them walk with their walker, sometimes hours after the surgery, based on what type of approach they had and what type of hardware they had in their system. I remember being like, this sucks so bad. I am grateful for everyone that needs those types of procedures, and I am super grateful for the physical therapists and the rehab professionals and the nursing staff that is able to facilitate people essentially walking pain-free for the first time. That just wasn't my thing. And about 2 months into a 3-month summer residency here, I'm like, oh man, I'm sitting there at lunch and I had such a good guy who was like training me. His name was Kevin Farmer. And Kevin's this big guy. He's probably 300, 350 pounds, huge. He was the guy that if like shit was going to hit the fan and somebody was walking for the first time, Kevin was going to be like, like grab them, throw them back into their bed, and everything would be cool. So everyone wanted Kevin right by their side while they were walking. So I was strong, but not strong like Kevin. But I remember him being like, yeah, man, this is going to be your thing, and he was a big sports guy. His kids ended up being great volleyball players and great athletes themselves. But he was like, yo, let's figure out something different for you. And I remember we would search at lunch. I would be doing all the reading just as you were. I'd be reading T Nation and bodybuilding.com and getting through the journals. And that's what I was doing during lunch in my free time. And he would see me doing this at all times. So I'd be on tnation.com reading articles from Eric Cressy, boom. I'd be reading an article from Todd Durkin. I'd be reading an article from Jim Wendler and all these people. And I'd be studying this shit, studying and then doing and then implementing with some of my clients. And then all of a sudden he was just like, why don't you reach out to these guys? If you have somebody that you think can teach you something and get you to the next level, it's not going to be in this hospital. It's going to be out there in the real world, and it's going to be back into sports performance because you love this stuff. And he challenged me to put together a list of as many of these influencers back in the day before they were like showing their ass and their abs. These were actual influencers of training and human behavior. I got a list of people and I sent off about 50 or 60 emails introducing myself, who I am, what I've done, and my goal is to be able to come in and volunteer or do whatever you need me to do in order to get a little bit of experience within your systems. And that was the best feeling in the world. I think it was like 2 or 3 days later, I spent the lunch just like hammering off those emails, 60 emails out. I thought it was going to be like scholarship time again. I thought everyone's going to line up. I'll give you this much money. I'll send you to medical school. I'll do all this to get you to play. Crickets. No one, not one person emails back. Not one single person within like a 7-day, week-long period. And then all of a sudden, like 2 weeks later, I get like 2 emails back. And then I email a couple times, correspondence, one drops off. And then one place gives me at the time it was a Skype call. It wasn't even Zoom calls. It was a Skype call. And I get on, I do like an hour interview. It's like, cool, boom. You can come in and you can do a postdoc residency and you can do an internship with us. And hey, welcome, but you gotta move to Southern California. Holy shit, okay, I think I can do that. So I end up going home and being like, Mom, Dad, I've been in Buffalo for a long time, but this is where I need to go. I got in contact with this facility. They're willing to take me in. They're willing to train me. They're not going to pay me, but I'm going to get the experience that I've always wanted. And at the time, they had all these MLB guys, and they had athletes from all over the world coming in. And it was just like the place to be, and it was a cool spot. And then the owner, a gentleman named Todd Durkin, he had a really good background in respecting rehabilitation, respecting functional training. He was a massage therapist himself. He had athletic trainers in there. He had physical therapists and chiropractors and strength and conditioning coaches and speed experts. So it was like a melting pot of all these different places or all these different people in this place. And that's after I graduated, that's what I ended up doing. My father and I took a drive from Buffalo, New York on one end of the country all the way to San Diego, California, North County. And we were able to spend that trip going over, which essentially would be the impetus to kind of like a trajectory change in my career. But I can remember like it was yesterday because it was one of the last trips I was able to take with my dad before he passed away. And he dropped me off at a Days Inn motel in Mission Valley, San Diego, because it was the cheapest place we could possibly find. And he said, like, hey, I'm so proud, like, go do your thing. You need to still sit for your boards. Like, he was very nervous that I was just going to give up on physical therapy and not sit for my boards. But I sit for your boards, make sure you're studying for that, but then go spend all of your energy and spend all of your passion over there at that facility and learn as much as you can and just simply be you. And that was the coolest thing in the world because it was finally like, I was like 26 years old, but I was finally out of the house and I was able to be given this opportunity. And it wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the accolades. It wasn't about anything other than trying to learn and be mentored and being in a new environment that would push the limits. And I had full support of my dad doing that because that was, I think, his new push for me to be able to explore something different than athletics, even something different than academics. Now is the time to meld those two things together and actually go do the thing.
It's funny how that works. It's like I love like the path of like, okay, like education was instilled in you and you worked really, really, really hard. And that granted you like the opportunity to play sports because if you were taking care of your academics, you could play the sports. And then you went into this idea of like, I loved baseball, I love teammates, camaraderie, but I think it was really the strength and conditioning. And you're pouring over the research, you're going over the bodybuilding.com, you're like emailing all these folks. I remember emailing Dr. Jim Stepani when I was a freshman in college. And I was like, what do I do, Dr. Jim? I want to be like you. And he got back to me. And it was like, I kept that
Wow.
email and I took a picture of it. I sent to all my friends in 2013. But it's funny because like you finally hit the nail on the head and it just seemed like everything changed. Take that 2,500-mile drive with your dad and you're like, hey, like this is it. And it's like you took that leap of faith to be by yourself. You're an only child. You're like, let's do this thing. And when you finally feel that, it's like everything becomes brighter, everything smells a little bit better, things are a little bit clearer, things taste better. You're like, hey, I'm really in that zone right now. And it took me a while too to find that. I was probably like late 20s until I was like, oh, I think I got it.
Yeah, it was the zone. It was the zone. It was my mecca. I was in my place. It was where I wanted to be, but I also earned my right to be there. And that first year was a whirlwind because, probably a couple months after my dad dropped me off there, he got a terminal cancer diagnosis. And, he was battling for his life, getting chemotherapy, continuing to work and be the man as the athletic director. But knowing very well that his time on this planet would be shortened. And, he only lasted a number of months after that. But I had that on my plate with being in Southern California after he just dropped me off to be able to do my thing. And he's in Buffalo, basically dying. And then I also had boards coming up. I needed to sit for those boards. That's what my dad wanted me to do. So driving towards that. And then all of a sudden, I was put into a position where, hey, I have my doctorate. Oh, I have my CSCS. I am a great personal trainer. All this stuff. It doesn't matter in the real world. None of that shit matters in the real world. So, what did matter in the real world for me, I learned this quickly. It was you continuing your education and refining your craft through different coursework, different mastery of systems, and how you could couple these systems together to create your offering for your clients and your athletes that was very distinct and representative of your entire distinct background. And I found myself being broke. My dad's dying of cancer. I got to study for boards. And I somehow made it to 12 certification courses through continuing education that year. Every single dollar that I made, which wasn't a whole lot of dollars, was going through a $600 ticket, a $1,000 ticket, a $1,300 ticket to go through things like functional movement screen. I was going through things like soft tissue manipulation with active release techniques. Anything that I could get my hands on, I was going in and I was sitting first row trying to learn and trying to better myself because very quickly, even with all my academic accolades, even with a lot of experience and my playing experience, none of that stuff mattered because the people that I was learning from and the people that were mentoring me were so highly elevated above what you actually do with continued education and systems development of how you train somebody, how you manage an athlete holistically, that I felt like I just needed to get better and like I hadn't learned anything. So that year was one of the hardest drives that I've ever done between everything that was going on. But I look at that year in terms of being able to invest my money and my energy with everything else that was swirling into being able to better my actual actionable education into probably what sparked like everything that would come after that because academic education, university education is awesome. Like I'll recommend it to anybody who does want to go and chase that endeavor. But when you get into the real world, it doesn't matter if you're Dr. So and so. It doesn't matter how many PhDs you got. It doesn't matter how many trophies you have for being the mathematician of the year. All it matters is results and relationships. And the better you can get at both of those things is basically going to make or break your career.
I can't agree more with that. It's I try to tell that to my students now who are like either seniors or like first or second year graduate students, and they're like, should I sit for this certification? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. But you also got to get on the horn and start calling people, volunteering your time, having conversations, to get where you want to get to. And even if it's not going to be your finite thing, because like you're pretty young, like at least it's going to take you in that direction. And it's funny because one thing that really kind of drew me to you was like I see like this whole like physical therapy thing, then this huge, database of like the strength and conditioning and the performance and the pain-free performance and all the books and courses you have. And I'm like, I feel like so many people get caught looking through one lens or one window, and they're like, oh, like you should never back squat because like it's axial loading. And then it's like, no, but axial
Yeah.
loading is going to like fend off osteoporosis and sarcopenia. It's a functional movement. Maybe you shouldn't go too heavy. So it's like, but what was it for you that things just started to kind of click into place as you kept increasing your education? Were there things that you go, huh, I didn't learn that or practice that the right way, and now I can refine it, and I'm now getting results with myself and my clients?
There was one time that stands out. So probably like 3 or 4 months into being in San Diego, I would always go there and train at 3:30 or 4 a.m. before I would get my 5 a.m. clients. So that would be me. I'd be always the guy on the gym floor. And I would be training hard and I'd be doing something like a early adoption of what we do with pain-free performance today. But one day I was there training and there was an athlete, one of the biggest studs that we had at the facility. His name was Mark Pryor, one of the best pitchers that has ever pitched in Major League Baseball. But he had injury problems and he had really a lot of trouble staying healthy. But his trainer that morning, he was sick. He wasn't there. Mark was there at 5 a.m. I didn't have a 5 a.m. And Mark turns over to me, and his wife's there. And I had done a little bit of personal training with his wife. And his wife goes, Mark, you need to work out. You need somebody to train you today. And then she sees me. I'm like foam rolling recovery work after my session. And it's like 4:45, something like that. And she points at me and she goes, John's a baseball player. He gets it. Train with him today. Holy shit. Okay. Yeah, let's do it, Mark. Super nice guy. One of the best guys I have ever met. And he didn't big league me at all. He just simply wanted to train. He wanted to learn. And he wanted to feel good that day. And he didn't want to get bitched out by his wife for skipping a workout. And that led to him being able to train with me full time. That led to him being able to do training and physical therapy with me. And that led to him referring probably 15 or 20 of his colleagues and his teammates over to me to really create a more robust list of unique baseball athletes at that point in time. And the thing that Mark did better than anybody in terms of any athlete that I worked with was he was always chasing perfection in terms of his throwing mechanics. We would go to Los Angeles and throw with Tom House, one of the top throwing experts the world has ever seen. He'd be chasing functionality. We'd go into the sports science lab in Orange County, and I'd come up there and I'd go right with him. And he was always chasing a way to feel better. So we were working on different manual therapy techniques, different recoverability techniques, but it was always like chasing something to continue to optimize towards perfection, even though perfection does not exist. And the coolest thing about Mark was he was making 10 million plus dollars. He had a house that was like $20 million in San Diego. He'd have me over to the house and train him and do all this stuff. He treated me like family. But he knew I was there to try to work with him as best as I possibly could, but I was also there to learn. It was very clear to anyone who ever worked with me that I wanted to give you my all, but I also wanted to learn as much as I could from you in the process. And Mark was a good enough guy to take me along for the ride. He took me along for the ride and he provided more opportunities for me to open up my eyes even wider than just San Diego, all across Southern California and then into professional baseball. And it was the opportunity of a lifetime. Like it really was. And I owe a lot of that today and what I was able to do for like the next 5 or 6 years after having worked with Mark due to the networking that I was able to do, and also some of the experiences that I was able to chase down in terms of trying to perfect and try to chase more education, more practical education on what I was actually seeing happen in front of us with the athletes that I was managing. But it's cool to see today, Mark was always a smart guy out of high school. He had a scholarship to Vanderbilt, then he went to USC, first round draft pick, but he's now like one of the best pitching coaches in the country. He's with the Los Angeles Dodgers, and he was in the front office at the San Diego Padres, and just an awesome guy. And you like to see that success because, when he's in the World Series, I point out to my 10-year-old son, I was like, Cam, Mark, that pitching coach right there, he's the reason that dad has a career today and dad's able to do what he does. And like, just like seeing that stuff come full circle, it is super special.
Do you still keep in contact with him?
Every now and then, yeah, we text a little bit. Yeah, he's busy there with the Dodgers.
I bet, yeah. Oh, the Phillies just beat them 2 out of 3, but yeah, no, that's amazing. I when you said his name, I was like, wait, are you talking about the pitcher? Yeah, he's talking about the pitcher. That's incredible. I'm curious to know, like, from your perspective, like, what have you seen specifically which allows Major League Baseball players to make it to the majors and then stay at that level? Because I understand like injury is a huge part of it too. And that idea of like always having to reinvent yourself. Like remember like Tim Lincecum, like the 5'9" pitcher from like the San Francisco Giants. Everyone's like, oh my God, Tim Lincecum. They kind of burned out after a couple of years. Same thing with Steven Strasburg. And I'm like, what is it about these guys who burn out, get injured, and just fall off the earth? Like what happens versus like someone who's been in the league for 20 years? Like why is Bryce Harper so good?
I think you have performance capacities, which can be measured on the field of play. And then you have resilience capacities that are super unsexy, but build the foundation of your health for the long term. And these two things aren't trained in the same way, and they're definitely not developed in the same way, and they're not refined in the same way. I'm dealing with this with my 10-year-old son right now. He's playing at the highest level in terms of his travel baseball. We go all across the Midwest. He's 10. And, he's doing things, and you see that it's very quickly a problem today, different than 20 or 30 years ago when I came up. And it is a totally different day and age. But I do believe that there are things that we can train for in order to put ourselves and our clients and our athletes in the best possible position to remain healthy in a repetitive unilateral overhead throwing sport like baseball. One would argue that throwing a baseball is one of the most dynamic things that you could possibly do. And it's also one of the most stressful things that you can possibly do, not only on the elbow, not only on the shoulder, but the entire complex. And I think we lose touch many times today with all the specialized sport specific training that we look at acute variables, we look at acute areas of the body, and we try to train to strengthen in an isolated fashion versus an integrated movement model. There's an anecdote from the Pain Free Performance book where I'm at the Milwaukee's Brewers field, American Family Field, and I'm working with one of the players before the game. This was last season. And I am able to connect with one of the other Brewers players. I actually had the connection point because his coach, who is an amazing coach, shout out to Matt Rosignol, unbelievable coach who works with this player called Jared Koenig. So Jared is an amazing story because Jared went from basically like not doing very well in high school, not doing very well in college, really not even making it to the pros, barely, and then going into the independent league and then bouncing around. Left-handed pitcher, big, strong guy, throwing maybe 90. And then all of a sudden, like he starts working with his coach and friend Matt, and they really get serious about things. And in talking to Matt and then listening to Jared talk about it as well, what was the big difference between going from 90 miles an hour playing independent ball to throwing 100 miles an hour for the best team in Major League Baseball as a go-to bullpen arm? What was the big difference in that transition period? And without getting too deep about it, he said, hey, the coaching and the off-season work that I did with my coach was a game changer. And I was like, well, what did you do different? Well, we ran an integrated model of movement. We got strong not only at the shoulder, not only at the elbow, we got strong across the upper body, the lower body, and the core, synergistically working together. In pain-free performance, we call that the pillar complex. The pillar complex is where health and performance come and meld together in order to give you optimal health and longevity. This is where I think we're missing the mark many times because it's not just about, hey, how am I training to throw harder? It's about how am I training to throw harder and be able to withstand those stresses so I can repeat it and actually stand the test of time. And very rarely do we see this today, and it's across basketball, it's across baseball, and a lot of the sports that I consult with, is that we lose sight of the principles that we know to be good, true, and effective in terms of base strength and conditioning. Dare I say, like a general physical preparedness model, and we get into the specialization model too quick, and we get it at too early of an age, and we get it at too high of volumes too early. And all of a sudden, we just simply can't move like human beings anymore. We can't connect the shoulders, hips, and core together like a functional human being. And we're throwing 97 miles an hour. So a lot of undue stress is going to the areas that we don't want. It is truly the $1 billion question about how to keep these athletes healthy. But I do believe that the base of all health endeavors, whether you're a professional athlete or just the average person out there wanting to look, feel, and function better, is your ability to be strong across foundational movement patterns and integrated patterns of global movements. Being strong at length in global movements, I think, is super underserved for these chronic injury populations.
Do you think that even starting off from your son, who's probably playing like a ton of baseball, that it really helps him specifically and his teammates to also play other sports and just run around in gym class and at recess to like do these different movement patterns and not specialize specifically in one sport as he's continuing to grow and mature?
I am the most unpopular dad on every team of every sport that I coach and I'm a part of because I have Cam playing multiple sports. He really loves basketball, he really loves baseball. He's a tri state champion in judo. And we are doing strict seasonal work, meaning that baseball starts in March and it goes through July. And then July to March again is going to be basketball season. And then all the parents, because we are playing on high level teams, they're like, hey, what about off season sports training? What about hitting lessons? What about pitching lessons? What about speed and blah, 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 blah. And hey, does Cam want to play on this team with us on the off season? No, we're not doing any of that stuff because I'm smart enough. I've been exposed to enough research and enough practical antidote to say that this is not only not going to help your child by early sports specializing, this is going to take away any hope of them excelling at a high level. And in likelihood, it's going to take away their love of the game. And I'm just not willing to do that to the number one person in my life that I love, who is my son. And I don't believe that anyone should be doing that to their kids. But I think that there is a weird society today, especially in high level youth sports, as crazy as that is to say, where it is the monetization of children and living out the parents' dreams and accolades through their children. And we know that the data is very clear on this. If you look at the last decade of professional athletes and Olympians that have medaled in the Olympics, about 94% of them played multiple sports up until the age of 14. So once you get into 15, 16, you're a sophomore, junior, senior year, you're going to be awesome. Go do your thing. But when you're 10 years old, when you're 8 years old, when you're 12 years old, let's get as much exposure to as many different sports, as many different positions, as many different stresses and activities as humanly possible. And we miss out on just allowing the kids to develop their neural patterning just by getting diverse exposures. When you're working on one single skill set, say, look at baseball, we lack athleticism. And then all of a sudden, a lot of the sports specific baseball work that I see doing, they're trying to fill the gaps with strength and conditioning at 7, 8, 9 years old. No, just have them play basketball. Have them go play football. How about some MMA, some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Judo like my son does? Let's get them different exposures, and we don't need to facilitate always a professional paid model of development. That's just not how it works when we're looking at developing great athletes.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that. That was a huge thing that we talked about in grad school. Do you know Dr. Avery Fagenbaum?
I heard the
Yeah,
name.
that dude, I think he's like from like the Northeast because like I'm from Philly, and that guy is like the OG like youth athletic researcher of like we need to get kids moving in different movement patterns. We need to have them exercising safely and healthfully. And he's like, yeah, you can have a 9, 10, 11 year old, do a clean and a jerk very, very, very safely, you start off with like a broomstick, and then you graduate up to a bar when they get big enough. And he's like, you have to do these things. And he had took a lot of flack in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, but now it's like, no, we need to be doing these things. And the whole like parent complex is like a bananas thing on its own. But even kids, I mean, I spent a couple years in PT as like an aide, and the amount of kids coming in there with blown out ACLs and Achilles injuries. And I'm like, you're 13 years old. How are you snapping an Achilles? Like, you're made of rubber bands and Crayola markers. Like, are you kidding me? You're 10.
I saw an amazing post from somebody who I've learned a lot from over the years, Eric Cressy, who
Yeah.
is the strength and conditioning coordinator for the New York Yankees now, legendary baseball strength and conditioning coach with his own Cressy Sports Performance facilities. He made a post the other day where he has athletes coming into him, youth athletes, college athletes, professionals. And he said through the first 5 or 6 years of having Cressy Sports Performance, he saw zero Tommy John. And this is probably 20 plus years ago. And he said, in the last 2 weeks at Cressy Sports Performance, we saw 14 kids under the age of 18 come through with Tommy John. And he said it's an absolute epidemic. And there's not just biomechanical properties that are failing, there's social properties that are failing in our entire development model. And, kids not being able to be kids, or kids being pushed to the brink for the wrong reasons. It's unhealthy across the board.
I had two students last semester who were sophomores, and they sat next to each other in my anatomy and physiology class on a school baseball team, and they both got Tommy John. And then the other kid this year tore a labrum, and I had a good conversation with him because he messaged me on LinkedIn. Then we talked in my office hours, and he goes, "Can I have your advice?" And I was like, "Sure." And he's like, "What do I do with my life?" And I was like, all right, like you're 19 now. You've had Tommy John. You had a torn labrum. And I was like, you're not starting. And like, no one's ever heard of our little school. And I was like, you're an intelligent kid, man. Like you can really help a lot of people if you want to do something health science or exercise science. But I don't want to take away from someone who is a Division I athlete, because I don't know what it's like to be like that. But like, I've even seen that, like the amount of my students who will give me that little slip of paper and go, "Up, yep, I'm getting surgery. I'm gonna be out for a couple of weeks." And I'm like, it's between volleyball, baseball, basketball, soccer. And I'm like, you're a kid. Like, this shouldn't be happening.
Health and performance can go together. Like, I feel like we have these two different sectors. It's like, what do you work on? Are you a sports performance coach, or are you a health personal trainer? And it's like, I've made my entire career up until this point on the idea that a health first fitness approach yields optimal performance. And that's super unpopular to say. I've been taking flack for that for the last decade plus, because we've always believed that the healthier the athlete and the healthier the person, the more optimally they will perform no matter their physical endeavor. And I think the influences throughout my career have made me push this so hard, because I've seen the opposite side. When you lose your health, you lose your performance almost every single time. What's the reason that most athletes need to retire? My hands up, injuries. So if you can't be healthy, it's going to be really hard to perform optimally. It's hard to build muscle when your joints hurt. It's hard to PR your marathon time when you have knees that don't work. It's hard to be able to go out and play on Sundays when your systemic health is an absolute dumpster fire. And I remember I was working at the time at the Chinese Olympic Committee in Beijing, and I was over there for a year working with a handful of their medalists that were prepping for the next Olympics as like kind of like a glorified personal trainer, if I'm being completely honest. And then I was also in charge of like 7 other teams in terms of like coordination of programming for strength and conditioning, from like the high-end Olympians down to the Olympic level prep, and then down into their development for their youth. So I was like kind of like doing a lot of different stuff out there. But I just remember working with two distinct athletes. I won't mention their names, but these were amazing, amazing athletes, medalists in the Olympics. And they were struggling so terribly with their health that they were unable to actually train and able to perform with me. And there was one instance where I was working with this badminton player, extraordinary athlete, just unbelievable kid too, like awesome, awesome human being. Everything's going through translation, so it takes a lot to communicate different things, but just the body energy, the smiling, the eye contact, this is my guy. It's my guy. And we were training and we were doing a physical therapy session, probably like an hour and a half or so. And then we were about to go into his strength and conditioning session. And I would go to the different part of Beijing. It was like on the sixth ring, not on the second ring. So you'd go out, and that's where the badminton players were. They weren't central. But it was like, hey, I really got to go to the bathroom. That's what he was saying through translation between the physical therapy and strength and conditioning sessions. So I was like, you know what, man? We've been at this for like an hour and a half. I got to go too. It seems weird, like this story is going in a weird direction, but we end up going to the bathroom together. We're in the urinals. There's not like the dividers like we have in America, so it's like essentially like a trough. And I'm sitting there going to the bathroom, going pee. He's sitting there going pee. I'm looking down into the trough, which is a central circulation of where the fluids would be going. And then all of a sudden, I see red fluid going into the drain. And I'm like, oh, something's wrong with me. I look down. No, that's not me. That's my athlete. He's peeing blood. He is peeing blood. And I didn't want to be alarmist about it, but we get out, we go through translation, and I said, hey, how long has this been going on? What? What do you mean? How long has what been going on? But you're peeing red, blood in your urine. And oh, this has been going on for the last year or so.
You can be in rhabdo for a year.
I don't think it was rhabdo. He had some deeper health concerns at that point in time, but bringing it to the attention of the medical staffing was something that I felt really like a fiduciary duty to be able to go and do. It was an
Yeah.
ethical dilemma that I had. Are we going to go and train that day, knowing very well that it's been close to a year that this young athlete had been peeing blood? Or do I just like go, hey, this is normal here. Let's just go in, just do my job. Let's just get him a session done, and then I'll see him next week. And I ended up, having like 4 or 5 hour conversation with the people that I needed to talk to, but really nothing really got done. Nothing really got done because training at a high level and training at the intensity and the durations and the overall volumes that they thought he needed to exceeded the need for health, or at least just peeing normal urine. So that was an eye opener for me. I was like, fuck this. I'm going to give him as much as I possibly can. I'm going to go and do my job, and I'm going to do it to my highest level. But fuck this. I don't really want to be a part of something like this. Giving up your health in order to try to get to a one performance level is what we need to do here. I'm not willing to do it. I am not willing to do that. And then soul searching came because I was out there by myself. Nobody at Olympic Village spoke English. So I was just sitting there, like, sitting by myself in my little dormitory, with all the other athletes and the coaches. And, you go through a lot of soul searching at that point in time. Like, what do you want to do? Like, are you doing your best work? Are you doing ethical work? Can you feel good about going to bed tonight knowing very well that you just saw that happen and nobody really gives a shit? And, I struggled with that for a couple of months over there. My last day over in China, it was an unfortunate day because I was working with the women's judo team. And it's cool that my son does judo now because I was working with the judo team. He thinks I'm cool because I used to do that with medalists. But I was working with the women's judo team, and one of the athletes was coming into the training session with me after doing her sports session. And it's all in the same arena. So it's like the weight room is kind of where the mats are. Everything's happening all at once in this big, big arena. And she's having, I think, bouts of vertigo. She's having dizziness. She's stumbling a little bit. Clearly, something's not right because this is a world-class athlete that is like fine-tuned to the gills. And very quickly, we see that something's not right. It's a medical emergency and something's going on. And I happened to have another physical therapist with me who was from Germany. He spoke English, so we were, thank God, together at this point at the judo center. And we end up going, I think this is an unstable C1, C2 fracture. That's what I'm thinking right now, just with all the diagnostics that I remember back from school. It's like once in a lifetime diagnosis. Him and I go over it before we approach the athlete with it. And there's a manual maneuver called a clunk test that you do. You essentially do something like this. If it makes the noise and the clunk, you have an unstable upper cervical spine. That is a medical emergency because it can essentially cut off your blood flow from your vertebral artery, or it could essentially sever your spinal cord. So this is a very serious thing. And boom, we do the maneuver together, me and the German physical therapist. We hear the sound go off. We go, holy shit, holy shit. And very quickly we get into communications again, and not successfully, we couldn't communicate what we needed to with the severity of what we just thought we had diagnosed manually. And unfortunately, that evening, that athlete went out and trained again. And I don't know what happened to this athlete. She wasn't like this big wig medalist that people would know her name. She was just another person in the development program. But that was my last day over there, and I ended up leaving after that and coming back to where I live now, Madison, Wisconsin, having like a very interesting outlook on what performance needs look like versus what do health needs look like, and just questioning like what I was doing at this high level of sport, because at the time it was like only professional athletes, like that's what I was there to do. And I think that like going through that and going through some of these realities, I didn't think it needed to be that way, but I also thought that, hey, if this is the way, then I don't want to be a part of it. So coming back stateside, it was another one of those like transition periods where you're like, these are the things that make the model of pain-free performance what they are today because of some of the experience that I endured and the experiences that I had to go through and find solutions for. And the thing that just humanizes pain-free performance above and beyond just the science, but the human nature of how to actually navigate the space of health and be able to perform and do all these things together. But there's certain things that just stick with you forever, and that's what comes through with the pages of these books too, because a lot of these stories and these anecdotes I start the chapters with, and it places you right into where I was when these big epiphanies happen, when these light bulb moments go off, and how that experience modeled the system that we run. And I think that paying homage to all the mentors and all the coaches and all the athletes that I've learned from, and then calling it out in the book, showing very well that we are a non-dogmatic approach. We want to be able to do everything and learn from everyone and be able to simply line up a successful system with no ego involved. That's what somebody could take away from pain-free performance.
That's incredible. And I wonder how many people have a similar story, in that you would never know just by reading a book or listening to a song that they wrote or them doing a podcast or a video. There's so much wrapped up in that. And like that's what I was going to ask you. Be like, did you ever look up the person online to see if like they're still alive, or like?
It doesn't exist. There is no online in China.
Oh yeah, because they're
We
they're
had to
censored
use,
the government. Yeah, jeez, you're right.
correct.
Holy
Yeah.
cow. Yeah, that's insane. No, it's funny because like I had no idea what I was stepping into today to speak with you about. Like I'm like, okay, like another like performance guy writing a book. I'm like, oh, this will be interesting. But no, and I feel like, as you said, you have like a bit of like a civil duty. It's like
It
it's
is.
like the story of the Good Samaritan. It's like you should be doing something. And like the fact that you're doing this and kind of you're still doing the performance piece, but you're focusing on health, acute health and chronic health in that as well. And even seeing with your son, you said he's the most important person in your life. You just want him to be healthy and have fun. You're going to push him, but like you want him to have fun and be healthy. And I mean, these stories, it's bananas that things do get pushed that far. It's like that one Netflix documentary. I think it was like the Russian gymnastics team of the girl who broke her ankle, and like the coach was basically just like yelling at her, like, "You're stronger than this."
It's real.
It's
It's
that
real.
was rough to watch on Netflix. And I was not there.
No, we lived it. It's definitely real. Those experiences. It's not sensationalized.
Yeah, one of my old professors, his son and daughter, I think they made the Olympics, or they were like Olympic hopefuls in judo. They're from Central Florida, and I remember like they had a spot in like Sports Illustrated. I think they had like a Got Milk scene or whatever. And when I was around there, like he was always plugging. He's like, yeah, like my daughter, my son are Olympic hopefuls for judo, and we had a whole lecture on weight cutting practices and how just crazy that gets with the parents trying to get their children to cut weight. And well, like we know what happens when you lose more than 2% or 3% of body weight. And like for someone like who's had heat stroke before, and it took me 6 months to get back from that, I'm like, why would you ever subject anyone in the world, much less your child, to something weight cutting, when it's in general, no one cares about these medals. Like it's done. Like
Yeah, I had that experience this summer. So my son went in and competed at the United States National Championships in judo in the 35 kg division, which he was a little light for. But you have to weigh in 24 hours beforehand, and there's over 4,000 people coming in to be able to win the national championship, essentially. And we get to this Marriott, and that's where the weigh-in was at one of the big ballrooms. And we pull up and we go into the parking lot and we see kids running in rubber suits in the parking lot, 92 degrees in the summer to be able to weight cut to make their weight. And then we also see inside of the hotel there's a Starbucks and there's kids just jamming food into their mouth like they haven't ate in like two weeks or so. And I got there and it was eye-opening experience because this isn't China, it's not Russia, it's America. And these things are still happening, and they don't have the technology and they don't have the resources to be able to hyperhydrate people after a weight cut. They're eating Starbucks donuts after their 2 week weight cut. And running the kids, there was one little kid, I won't never forget this. He was running for 3.5 hours. Cam and I got to the Marriott. We went in and waited an hour to weigh in. We went and ate dinner for an hour and a half. We waited another hour and we went to see something. And we came back, and the little boy, probably about 9 years old, was running in the rubber suit 3.5 hours later
You probably ran an entire
with his
marathon.
with his coach and his dad behind him.
Oh my
I said, this
gosh.
is fucked up. And at that point, I was like, Cam, we're never going to do stuff like that. You might be 6 pounds under in your division, but like, we're not going down to that bottom division. Like, we're just not doing it. You're going to go out and do as well as you possibly can with what you came in with, and you can feel good about doing that. But there are certain things that when you put the, you're not going to perform well doing that anyways, but you jeopardize somebody's health. You also jeopardize their mind. A dysfunctional relationship with physical fitness, with physicality, with sport, and then also with nutrition. That lines people up for a slippery slope because, hey, that kid needs to live another 60 or 70 years as a human. Where do we go from here? So being able to ingrain like quality habits across the board with physical fitness and just the health habits, that's super important for like children all the way up into some of the early adults that I work with right now that are playing at a high level, and definitely for people that are hitting their middle age, like not actually going through and delving into the details of what a healthy lifestyle actually looks like.
Are you familiar with like Red S syndrome?
I'm not.
Like with the like a lot of like huge weight cuts, and even like the female athlete triad. There's like a ton of issues with that, even with a lot of aesthetic based sports where there could be calorie cutting, where there could be exhaustive physical activity. You could have hemolysis of like the red blood cells. You could have reduced bone mineral density, like loss of like a period. There's so much research now being pumped out with respect to Red S and the female athlete triad, and like how we need to fuel healthfully and not just focus on like
Yeah,
weights, aesthetics, what's in the mirror, what someone's doing on social media. Because it gets just like insane. And it's funny because I feel like it would have been so easy for you to go into this camp right here of, 17 years old, all American, all these different sports, and have like 30 D1 offers. I can go to med school. I'm the coolest kid around. This is awesome. And then boom, you get injured and everything just kind of falls out. And you would have been the perfect candidate for, I don't know, drug abuse or, being depressed or, doing something bad. But instead you turn it over into like this really positive thing of like, I'm going to help everyone out, but not push them to the brink of something unsustainable and unhealthy. Do you think you got that from your parents and your upbringing?
I do. And you said something before that I do agree with, where it's like I feel like it is my duty and my service to be able to pay this stuff forward. And I think that that is a key driver. Like every single day is it's not the easiest thing. Like we go through and we run almost 200 certification courses every year, live and in person with pain-free performance. That's not the easiest thing to do. But why do we do it? Because we want to impact people in the deepest way possible with experiential education. And that's like trying to pay it forward and teaching people systems that they can be successful with. And going in and running different businesses or doing different endeavors or writing a book for 3 years. it's definitely not like an ego trip for me. It's not necessarily even about me or what I think I need to share with people. It's about them actually getting the information because I feel so deeply about it helping them that I can't afford not to do it. And I think that that drives everyone forward, at least on my teams. And it's definitely led by that deep service base where you essentially just want to help if you can help. And if there's people out there that can't help themselves, it's up to you to be able to step in and give them the tools to be able to be successful. Like, I do believe that everyone deserves the chance to be healthy. Everyone deserves the chance to be happy. Everyone deserves the chance to live a life that they can have uninhibited physical health and fitness with. And with that, it's we're swimming against a huge current right now. And anything that we can possibly do to try to turn those tides just a little bit is huge. You know, we run all these courses and I've done a lot of education. I have great training teams and clients, but being able to have the book hit a mass audience, because the book's not just for strength and conditioning coaches, not just for physical therapists. It wasn't even written for those people. It was written for the average person to be able to have the solution for their health and wellness and getting ready with pain-free training on their own autonomously and being able to do it with confidence and competence. And I think that a large driving factor towards doing that was just peeling back even deeper what somebody needs to do in order to be physically healthy and successful. But it's, yeah, it's something that's driven me forward a long time, and it continuously will. But I think that along the lines of my career, in all of my years, and all the different aspects of the industry that I've been in, simply wanting to give people the best or your best and wanting to serve them, it's a rare thing today with everything that's about a me society. But when you can make it about the person in front of you and being able to be selfless about it, you can do that whether you're online or in person, whether you're at this university or whether you're going out and teaching continuing education courses, whether you're working in the commercial gym or whether you're working with the New York Knicks. I think that a common trait amongst all successful people in all of our different aspects of this allied health and fitness profession is just being selfless and paying our best forward to every single person that we work with.
And it's funny, when we first hopped on this call today and I was asking you about your book and everything, you immediately wove me off and you waved me off and you're like, hey, we don't got to talk about my book. This isn't a plug. This is about us having a conversation. I think you're serving your dad. You're representing your dad really, really well with all the stuff that you're doing. And your son in 20 years from now is going to be like, yeah, my dad's my superstar. And apparently my grandfather was his superstar.
It is. One of the most special things that I did last week was I got the book in my hands for the first time. So, 2 years, 8 months, and 18 days it took me from start to finish of this project. And a lot of people working their hardest on it. So I finally got this textbook in my hands. And I was able to share it with Cam, and I was able to actually sit him down and have him unbox it with me. And my wife actually got it on video, which was super special. It was over on my Instagram. And he paged to the third page and it said to Cam, this book is dedicated to you. With your health and a lot of hard work, anything is possible. Chase your dreams. That was super cool. Like, it made the whole process worth it. Right there, if it never sells a unit of book, if it never goes on the bestseller list, me being able to take my best work, something that I've worked so hard with, essentially my life's work and all the systems that we've developed, and be able to hand it over to my son and have that be for him, that experience, it says it all. Like, it was everything that I needed out of the process. Whatever happens here on out with the success of the book or going forward in my career, being able to share that moment, it was super cool. And, so many people within my network, within our pain free performance community, all of our certified coaches, personal friends, colleagues of mine, I must have got 1,000 text messages after that video went out and said that it brought people to tears because of how real it was and how meaningful it was to both him and myself. And that was the coolest thing, man. Like, it made all the hard work worth it, just being able to share it with somebody that you really love and I think who looks up to me. And I definitely want to be able to serve him as best as I can.
It's funny. I think people are going to, read the book and get a ton of like practical applications from it and be like, oh, I'm going to keep referencing this. I'm going to take a picture of this. I'm going to highlight this. But what you got out of it is like this eternal sense of like, I don't know, maybe like peace and satisfaction of knowing that like everything that you've ever done led you to this moment right now, which is then serving all of your, obviously like your clients and your coaches, but like most importantly,
Yeah,
your wife and your son. And it's like, it's out of
yeah.
one side of the book, it's like all the education. Out of this side for you, it's about the family, the love, the respect from generation to generation. It's no one would ever know that.
Yeah, it's some of the stories will speak to it a little bit, but I definitely didn't want to go through and write a textbook, 574-page textbook. That was not on the top of my priority list with everything that I have going on. But if I'm being completely frank and honest, in mid 2022, I was at an event in Chicago, and I had my entire team there, and I was sick and I was hurting. I had some internal health issues. I had COVID, and I had full body poison ivy all at once. And I executed our certification course that weekend. And I drove 2 hours home with my wife and one of my colleagues in the car. And I didn't end up making it home. I ended up making it into the hospital. And at that point in time, I knew like I was burned out. My health was failing me because of not because of my training practices, not because of my nutrition or my sleep hygiene. It's because I was driving so hard forward to try to serve others that I honestly thought that that was probably going to be my last event. That was most likely going to be something that I wasn't going to be able to be doing again. And I want this to be able to hit more people and live on. So that was in July of 2022. November of 2022, I got approached with the ability to come together with Victory Bell Publishing, my co-author Glenn Cordoza, who's an absolute legend in the field. And they said, hey, we want to bring pain-free performance to life. We want to make a mainstream textbook, and we're going to back this thing and put every resource that we have behind it. And my first thought was good because I don't know if I'm going to make it the rest of this year. I had just come out of surgery. It sounded like I had to go back into surgery again. And I was like, hey, if I can at least get this book out there and I'm not here to be able to see it through, then at least it'll be here for my son and it'll be here for the community and pain free performance will live on. Like it wasn't that dire and it didn't end up being that dire. I was able to bounce back and today I feel better than I ever have in my entire life. But going through the process with that, that serious of a thought going through your mind of why you're actually doing this and bringing this to light now as opposed to years ago or years into the future. That was a driving factor. So if this is the last thing that I do, I want people to remember it and I want people to be able to gain value from it. And when Glenn and I finished this project and we got this to the printer and the publishing house had a look at it, it's going to be the most robust resource that anyone's ever produced in fitness industry history. And we joke around that we don't know if we can pull it out of ourselves to be able to do it again. So this is most likely the best book and the best educational resource that will ever be created.
Well, it's funny. I was going to ask you like, what's next? And you're telling me right now. I feel like at the end of like this little chapter, as you said, like with your, your parents said, like, you got to go through these chapters, 3 to 5 years, whatever it's going to be. You worked unbelievably hard with your co-author, your friend, doing this for the community, doing it for your son, doing it for yourself. Um, then maybe you'll take a little bit of time to relax a little bit, keep focusing on your family. And then maybe when we have this conversation in 2026 or 27, you'll be like, hey, I have this itch. I can't really talk about it yet, but I think something's brewing.
Yeah, there's always something brewing, but I'm just so blessed to have a great life right now. And, we're working extraordinarily hard. I have an amazing coaching business with some of the best clients in the world from all different walks of life. I have one of the most successful training apps out there with the Unbreakable app that just brings so much value to almost everybody in terms of a price point accessibility that makes me proud to be able to get into the hands of people. And then in terms of the education, pain-free performance specialist certification, 20,000 certified coaches out there with PPSC credentials behind their name. None of that stuff is stopping. And it's only going to get bigger and better. And we're going to continue to work to refine it and serve those people. So, with the book, it's a big celebration of all those things kind of coming together and being able to just be a big hell yeah in terms of the training and the education and the coaching all being in one place to be able to put on your coffee table and take a peek at every single time you're thinking about skipping the workout.
I love that. Yeah. This has been great. Where can people pre-order the book? It's coming out in about a month from now. Where can they get it? Amazon, Barnes and
Yeah,
Nobles.
go to Amazon, and that is going to be your easiest way to get it. So, Pain Free Performance by Dr. John Russin on Amazon. And then, if you do go in and pre order it, there are huge advantages of actually waiting 4 weeks for the book to arrive because I've set up pre order bonuses that give you free training programs, a free education, coaching, and a chance to even host a certification course or attend a certification course from Pain Free Performance just by going in and pre-ordering the book. So we've set those bonuses up over at becomeunbreakable.com/book bonus. So all you have to do is pre-order, reserve your copy, and then get that instant education and programming right away.
Awesome. I'm going to link all of that down in the description and as well as like your Instagram. I guess people can obviously find you there. That's how I found you. So this has been awesome. Thank you so much for the conversation and taking the time to speak today. I'm excited to get the book soon. I'm going to have to pre-order it. I'll let you know how it is.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate your support, and this was an awesome opportunity to come on and chat.
Awesome. I'll talk to you soon, John.